Hello students, welcome to today's lecture. I'm your lecturer, Dr. Susan Macharia from the School of Education, the Department of Educational Psychology. And today I want to present to you a unit by the name Human Growth and Development, code BEP 1102. This is a very important unit for all students who want to become teachers or to join the teaching profession, because one of the things that you need is to know your learner, how he has been growing and developing, or even the milestones that he has made to be in your classroom. And therefore, this is a unit that teaches you something about the developmental milestones that your learner has undergone, so that once he or she finds himself in your classroom, you can easily take up from there and generate that learner until he or she is able to achieve his fullest potential. So ladies and gentlemen, this is our topic today. We are just doing an introduction. And during our introduction, we are going to unpack the entire phenomenon of human growth and development. So when we say we unpack, I want you to note that development is a broad word. And we are going to divide it into small segments so that you are able to know different aspects of development in terms of either physical, social, cognitive, moral. Even during adulthood, you'll also need to know what goes on, so that even when you're interacting with parents and members of the community around the school, you are able to be cognizant of the developmental milestones they are experiencing, and therefore you can be able to respond adequately to their point of need. So, today, I want us to look at some of the things that you will be able to achieve by the end of this lecture. The first thing is that we want to be able to define a few of the terms in human growth and development. We'll also be able to describe some of the criteria we can use to determine the changes in human development. Because as a teacher, you have to have a rough idea. How will you know that development have taken place in your learner and the different members of the school community? You'll also be able to explain the factors that affect human development, at least 5 of them, and then you also have to have a rough idea about the principles that inform human growth and development. So, ladies and gentlemen, we have those three objectives in our today's lesson, and I want you to journey with me as I present this lesson. And because you have just joined the community of scholars, ladies and gentlemen, we are going to be generating a lot of our information from scholars and sources that are scholarly. And therefore, our first word that I want us to be able to define is growth. Now, growth is not a new word to us, but we want to contextualize it within what we call the Encyclopedia Britannica. And we want to say that growth is basically an increase in size or the amount of an entity. It entails those physiological changes or even the structural ones that take place within an individual. And this one takes place as a result of maturation. We'll be able to define maturation in the course of the lesson or even the next. For example, the minute you find your learner in the classroom, you want to see whether he is growing. And therefore, one of the things that you will note is perhaps increase in size. Is he getting taller? Is he increasing in weight? And that is growth. Now, let's go to the next term. Development. Now, development is basically what I want us to be able to define and contextualize. And it refers to the qualitative changes in an organism as a whole. In growth, it was quantitative. That means you can put a number to it. But in development, you want us to be able to say the quality. And we can say it can also be contextualized as the changes in complexity of a living organism. And when we say a living organism is getting complex, it simply means that there were things that, or functions that living organism could not be able to function, but as it is developing, it is able to develop appropriate abilities for it to be able to cope with the changes that are there. For example, if you think about a young child, at the point of birth, he is not able to walk or even speak. But with the time, he is able to acquire a language and to communicate his or her needs without necessarily having to cry, using words. So that is a form of development. He's also able to move around in the house, in the community, and that indicates development. It's not growth. And therefore, development basically is continuous, through which physical, emotional, and intellectual changes occur within that organism. So ladies and gentlemen, I hope by now you are able to distinguish between the two terms, growth and development. Growth is quantitative, involves changes in weight and height, but development is qualitative, and here we talk of increasing in complexity in the way the organism functions around its environment. Again, from Encyclopedia Britannica, the term development also can be conceptualized as the progressive change in size, shape, and function. But the key word here is the function. How is that individual changing in terms of the way it is functioning around its environment? And development, again, takes place throughout the lifespan, from before birth to the end of life. So life, hopefully, is supposed to end when maybe in old age. So development takes place throughout the lifespan. So from there, we want to understand, when we talk about development, what is it? And this time, let's look at what we call the nature of development. So for us to be able to understand development more deeply, ladies and gentlemen, we have to divide it into small sections to help us focus and be able to explain when called upon. Now, it can be viewed in 4 different ways. The first one is in terms of its origins. So where does it all start? And here we talk of the biological processes, where we have the transmission of genes into the zygote. Cognitive entails the thinking and reasoning processes, and psychosocial has got to do with the interaction with the environment. The second one is to do with the periods of development. So if you want to understand development, you have to unpack again, as we have said earlier. You cannot just think of development wholesale, divide it into small segments, and this time we can conceptualize it in terms of the different sections in terms of development. And here we can divide development into different segments. For example, before birth, that's what we are calling prenatal. Infancy is the first years between birth and age of 2 years. Then we have early childhood, middle childhood, adolescence, and adulthood. And therefore, in our course, ladies and gentlemen, we are going to be considering the periods of development all the way from before birth up to adulthood. And we can see what happens to different aspects of the organism in terms of the changes in function and complexity. The other one is to do with some of the issues or concerns that are involved in the development. What are these developmental issues or concerns? Now, the first one is going to be what we call nature and nurture. What actually controls development? So we want to, under these developmental issues or concerns, we want to see what is it that controls development. Is it the nature? Is it the nurture? Nature has got to do with the genetic makeup of that individual. Nurture has got to do with the role of the environment or experience, or that environment within where that person is growing up. What is it that controls? The next one can be viewed in terms of the role of culture. Now, culture, as you very well know, is the way of life. And human beings grow in different contexts, and they acquire different habits, mannerisms, language, and all. But we want to understand, how does this culture influence human growth and development? The other one has got to do with the role of gender. Ladies and gentlemen, you'll agree with me that at the point of conception, we have the sex differences in terms of males and females. But in terms of gender, we know gender is basically socially constructed. So we want to see what makes someone male or female in terms of gender. And last one is the stability or the change. What is it? What is stable and what is changing in terms of human growth and development? The last perspective or way to be able to conceptualize this human growth and development is called the developmental perspectives. Now, what is a perspective? A perspective is a viewpoint. It's a way of looking at it differently. And we want to see these perspectives coming from psychoanalytic. Psychoanalytic has got to do with our innate characteristic, and we analyze how these influence our development. Then we talk of cognitive. Cognitive, again, has got to do with our thinking and reasoning processes. Cultural has got to do with our interaction with the environment and the kind of experiences we acquire from that culture. And of course, learning means that as we interact with members of the different communities around us, we are able to observe and acquire characteristics that influence the way we grow and develop, and of course, inform our personality. So when we talk of the nature of human development, ladies and gentlemen, think about the four things that we have said: the origins, the periods, the developmental issues or concerns, and even the perspectives. So even in our course, we'll see how all these things fall in place, such that by the time you are done with the unit, you should be able now to see the influence of biological, cognitive, and psychosocial aspects on development. You'll also be able to see or be able to describe what's going on in terms of the different periods of development from before birth up to adulthood. You'll also be able to see some of the issues that affect development, whether gender, culture, stability, and so on. You'll also be able to do all these things that we're talking about, the perspectives. So they are somewhere within our course, and we should be able to get there. The next thing that I want us to be able to do today, class, we want to think about, we want to understand this development more deeply. And if you remember, as I was doing my introduction, we talked about you being able to say something about the 8 principles or thereabout of development. So as I continue with my lecture, ladies and gentlemen, make sure that by the end of the lecture, you have at least acquired 8 of them. And I'll go through them slowly as you put down a few notes on the same. But before we begin, let's first of all understand what is a principle. A principle is basically a fundamental truth that serves as a foundation to understand something. So if it's a fundamental truth, what has it got to do with human development? It means that a principle of human development is basically a proposition or a fundamental truth that helps you to understand how human development occurs. So, you'll also note that in most of the examinations around that are relating to this unit, you'll be asked to say something about principles of development. And this is a key area that every person who wants to be able to learn about the human person should know. So, you're going to talk about 8 principles or thereabouts. In fact, I think we have more than that. So let's look at the first principle. Number 1, development follows a direction and uniform pattern in an orderly manner. But for us to be able to understand these directions, we talk of two key trends. The first one is what we call the proximo-distal. I'm sure this proximo-distal is a new word to you, but let's understand it. Proximo-distal simply means that development starts from the center line to the outer parts of the body. So where is this center line? So we think about the human being, especially during the prenatal state before the baby is born. The center line could be from the heart or the spinal cord to the outer. And therefore, for this example, you can see we have the spinal cord, which develops first before the outer part of the body, such as the arms and the legs. And therefore, this trend is what we call proximal distal. Again, the internal organs, such as the heart and lungs, develop first during the prenatal stage of development, and then the rest of the body goes there, follows thereafter. The second one is what we call the cephalocaudal. I'm sure cephalocaudal is a new word to you, but let me make it simple. Cephalocaudal simply means that development proceeds from the head to the heel. So cephalocaudal is a trend where development begins from the head to the heel. And as you can see from that, the example I've put over here, class, here we have the child starting to gain control from the head first, then the arms. Another example, note, when a baby is just born, I don't know if you've ever seen a child who has just been born. If you observe that child, you'll see the head appears big, and then the rest of the body becomes smaller, 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 and the foot is the smallest. That is, again, a simple example of the cephalocaudal trend of development. So what would happen if the head was small and the feet big? The child would be abnormal in terms of the development pattern. So even in terms of function, this cephalocaudal trend means that the head develops first. It's able to do a few functions compared to what is at the farthest point from the head. And that is why we are saying here that this child can do some activities with the head first before he moves the hands and the legs. And you'll agree with me that for many parents, as soon as they see that the baby can raise her head when put on a flat surface, they know development is taking place. The next principle. Now, development depends on maturation and learning. Now, what is maturation? I'll define it at this point, and perhaps we'll meet the same word elsewhere. Maturation basically means the gradual unfolding of genetically determined characteristics. And therefore, when the zygote is formed, it has genetic material and a genetic plan. This one just unfolds. It's just like a flower opening slowly. That's what we are calling maturation. Learning simply means the interaction with the environment. They acquire characteristics from the environment within where this individual is growing and developing. Number 3, we have individual differences in development. Now, people don't develop in the same way, even if they are born the same day, because each person is unique and they develop along their own different path. And that is why we are saying that each individual here develops as per his abilities or in perception of his environment and, of course, his genetic plan. So we have individual differences there. We don't develop the same way. Number 4, development is a continuous process. And when you say development is a continuous process, it takes place throughout the entire lifespan. At no time do we have development getting to an end or stalling. It is a continuous process, but sometimes you find there are some phases of growth and development where it is accelerated. For example, during the first 2 years of life and development, we have the baby, grows very fast the first 2 years. At adolescent, also, we have what we call the growth spurt. Number 5, development always involves change. So you always know that some development has occurred if there's a change. And in terms of change, you can notice in terms of maybe simple things to do with the size, proportion, and maybe disappearance of the old features and acquisition of new ones. So note that for any development that has taken place, there must be a change. And the goal of this change, maybe before I go to the next slide, the goal of this change, note here, very important, is to make sure that the individual becomes self-realized or self-actualized. And the psychologist who came up with that is none other than Abraham Maslow, around 1970. Another one that I want us to be able to learn, development has what we call potential hazards. Development has potential hazards. And hazards may be physical, environmental, psychological, which are available in the environment. So not everything supports development. Some interaction with the environment can cause developmental hazards. For example, before a baby is born, if the expectant mother exposes herself to drugs, they interfere with the growth and development of that unborn child. And that is basically an environmental hazard. Number 7, different aspects of development are interrelated. Now, what are these different aspects? We have social, we have cognitive, we have physical, we have moral, and the rest. So what will happen is that a change in one aspect of development affects all the others. For example, if a child is not getting adequate nutrition, then of course all the other aspects of development are affected. Physically, he is not able to grow well, can't put on enough weight, he can't grow high, he can't add the height. In terms of cognition or school activities, he's performing poorly. In terms of social, not able to interact effectively. And that's why we are saying that different aspects of development are interrelated. And therefore, it's very important for a teacher to understand this principle of development. Number 8, human development is a holistic process and not piecemeal. So when you say holistic, what comes to your mind? So holistic simply means that it is integrated. It doesn't take place bit by bit. And therefore, it involves physical, intellectual, spiritual, and emotional development. Meaning what? That when the physical development is taking place, intellectual one is also ongoing, spiritual, moral, cognitive, all of them are happening together. And therefore, for us to be able to understand this development, let's note that we do not start with physical, we keep aside social and cognitive, and then later on we come and pick the whatever you left behind. When one aspect is developing, all the others are also developing. And that's why we are saying that it is a holistic process. 9, development proceeds from general to specific and from simple to complex. Now, there's an example here where the babies can be able to move their arms before grasping with the thumb and index fingers. Even in language development, the baby will begin by general words to mean a series of so many things before being able to select a word that means exactly one thing at a time as required. Number 10, development is cumulative. So when we say it's cumulative, it simply means that the changes that we observe in a human being as they grow and develop do not emerge all of a sudden. It's a series or a collection of so many small minimum changes put together to be able to come up with the change that you see. Even when the time the child speaks his first word. And what do you think the baby's first word is? Class. Mama, Baba. He might say ba. Before he says ba, he has been cooing and saying some other words that we don't seem to understand, and then finally ba. And that means it's a collection, a cumulative process of so many small changes that we do not seem to see until the first word emerges. Now, let's go to the last part of my lesson. We are going to look at now some of the factors that might influence human development. I'll give you 5 factors that influence human growth and development. The first one is heredity factors or hereditary factors. Of course, these hereditary factors have got to do with our genetic makeup that we receive from our parents at the time of conception. And that's where we say that the child carries genetic endowments from the parents, which are, and with these characteristics, we have, with this genetic material, we have characteristics being transmitted from one person to the next across the generation. And these are things like physical characteristics, height, weight, eye color, and psychological characteristics, for example, intelligence, personality, creativity. All these ones, sometimes, if not most of the times, they are carried by the gene that we receive from our parents. So ladies and gentlemen, if you know you are coming from a community or some parents, your parents are intellectually gifted, you would expect that you also perform well, but we'll see later that is not always the case. There's an interaction between these hereditary factors and the environment, and that's why sometimes you are not able to see your learner performing so well, though the rest of the parents are okay. The second one is what we are calling the environmental factors. The environment consists of a wide range of stimuli that provide an experiential base for the development of that child. So the environment is different. First of all, depending on where is it that this child is growing. What is there within that environment that will support or hinder his or her development? Do we have enough food? Do we have play activities? Do we have a parent-child interaction that's positive? That's an environmental influence. So depending on whatever is there in the environment, it will support or hinder how the child is growing. Now let's go to the next one, cultural factors. Now, culture is the way of life. And the child learns the habits, beliefs, attitudes, skills, and standard of judgment from the interaction with other people around. And therefore, this culture, depending on what is around there, the child will be able to learn. Next, let's go to the home environment. The home environment is where the child is growing. The experiences from the family, siblings, caregivers, and of course the daddy if he's around. And this is where it exerts tremendous influence on the child's understanding of how that world outside, the external world, is like. And if that home environment is good or favorable, it is supposed to build the self-concept of the child and to prepare him or her to interact effectively with the external world. But if the home environment is not okay, that will now help us to explain why the children don't have a positive self-concept. And let's look at a bit of the conclusion for this first lesson. We have been able to distinguish between growth and development. We've also been able to see some of the things that help us to conceptualize development, human development, what the nature of human development. We've also been able to learn about 10. Actually, I had said 8, but I added 2 more. They are now 10. We have also been able to see some of the factors that influence human growth and development. And ladies and gentlemen, there's no single lesson that doesn't have an assignment. And for your assignment, let's see what we can do. Number 1, we have been able to define growth and development. But I want you to be able to write 10 differences between growth and development, so that in case you find that in your exam, at least you can say, yes, we did it as an assignment, or I researched on it. The other thing, I want you to also research and make some short notes on why you think we should learn this course. And that means, can you be able to generate 10 points that help you to see the relevance of this course, Human Growth and Development, to you as a prospective teacher or an educator? So the assignment has got 2 questions. It's also very important that you attend to that and read widely. So I've come to the end of my lesson, class. I hope you have enjoyed yourself. Thank you so much, and stay safe.
These televised lectures supplement our robust online learning going on our MKU online platform. You can view more on our televised lectures via our online platform. We are in a digital era, and Mount Kenya University knows this. The following are the steps to follow so as to complete your online application. Download the application form from the website www.mku.ac.ke. Attach copies of your academic certificates and ID. Pay the application fees via M-Pesa pay bill number 270988. Your ID is the account number. 2,000 shillings is the charge for a postgraduate. You can also deposit in the bank accounts provided on the website. Then email all the above to apply@mku.ac.ke.